He took me to Grand Central Station and he said, "This is yours."
No, come on. How embarrassing that must actually.
Like 11th edition, which is in 33 volumes, but thin, and this is the last edition that was written before it became from 1911, before it got completely rewritten and became, for the masses.
These are like the new rage, right? Like these glasses. Okay, ready for me to look totally retarded?
I can buy your family. Piss off.
It's time we become our own Rockefellers. We're going to go through the Bloodline families. Actually, a documentary that one of the descendants made, and it's quite controversial and kind of shows beyond the veil.
What we're talking about when we talk about the elite and their children, and why you go through history, you read Plato and his 5 regimes, you read anybody who understands the dynamic that when a son takes his father's place, he doesn't have any experience, right? Just like we don't have any experience of what patriotism really would be if it were a true thing at all. We don't have any experience fighting for our country. So the son taking over the plantation or the corporation or the family trust or whatever is very dangerous because, and I think they know this, and the son is never the father. So the son is going to immediately start to try to make things, fit his own criteria, and will never understand doing things the way his father did, or the necessity of doing certain things in modern times, that kind of stuff. So what I wanted to say before we start is these people are born, it's called born rich, but this is the real notion of, if you were to say white privilege, right? A bullshit concept if I've ever heard one, because like 60% of white people that came over to America paid for their ships ride over by becoming an indentured servant. Okay, so most people that came over here were indentured anyway. That's all your white people, all your Germans, all your Irish, all your English. They didn't come over here free people. They were enslaved. It's just called indenture because it's a contract. Slavery has no contract. So you got to understand that this is a matter of wealth beyond measure, meaning we are controlled by money. They have no concept of what it would be to be controlled by money, except for the limits they put on themselves, which they don't need to if they don't want to. But of course, you got to keep the wealth in the family, right? So you got to look at this from a completely different perspective of what privilege really is. The privilege not to be bound by money is something that we can't even imagine, right? And I think that has to be said, because you can't really blame the kids when they're raised to be this way, right? I mean, and one of the things I think that has to be said right away, and we'll talk about it when they say it, is do something. Care what you do something. Imagine if you grew up and your parents said, "I don't care what you do, just do something." And but see, this is what he doesn't say. Whatever you do, I guarantee, and the family, the bloodline guarantees that you will be successful. In some way, you will find success. You want to be this, you want to be that, you will be successful and somehow make money from your endeavor. But do something. You can't just sit back and do nothing and spend the money. You have to do something. And the other thing I want to say before we start this is remember this very important thing, that money and time are the same thing. So what these people have is the ability to buy time. In other words, they have all the time they want. They just exchange it for money. Money's worthless to them, basically. It has no bearing on what they do. And so you got to consider that if I want to become, let's say I want to become an artist or a sculptor, I can only do so by applying myself in so many ways, spending so much time learning. And These guys pay, what was it, Rodin to take a lesson, right? And get all of his time, his life's experience taught to them by exchanging that which represents time, money, for the knowledge and the time that it took to gain that knowledge and perspective. So whatever they do, they're going to be truly privileged and truly, you know, supported in a way that you and I can't imagine. Imagine if all of our ideas that we had, if I said, "Hey, I just want to do this," hey, it's great as long as you do something. Here's $1 billion to get you started. You know, imagine if you had that kind of privilege. When you talk about privilege, I mean it's something that we none of us can understand. I don't care what color you are, unless you're in a situation like this where you are one of the wealthy, beyond wealthy elite. You know, this is the class that rules. No, this is the class that we're talking about when we say the private associations rule the world and that guy. I had to be say that because the importance of this film probably gets lost in its sort of low production value. Whereas my comment is this kid could have had as much money as he wanted to make a movie, right? There's no limits to what he could have done as far as budget wise to make this film look good, and he didn't. So this movie, I don't think is meant for the masses as much as people like us.
This is a party for one of the Johnson & Johnson family members. They are of Johnson & Johnson. You may not know that some of these people are actually Johnson family members, so treat everyone as if they are.
I always expected that my 21st birthday party would be the greatest night of my life. Champagne, pretty girls. You wonder, can life get any better than this? Well, to be blunt, it can. At midnight, I'm going to inherit more money than most people could earn or spend in a lifetime. I've been waiting for this night for as long as I can remember. The thing is, now that it's here, I'm not really sure what to make of it all. I live in a country that everyone wants to believe is a meritocracy. We want to think that everyone earns what they have. I guess if it makes you feel better, keep telling yourself that. It doesn't work for me anymore. I know my family gives away millions of dollars each year to charity, but how does that exactly level the playing field? I mean, what did I do to earn the kind of money I'll own at midnight tonight? All I did was inherit it. My grandfather Seward was the first generation to be born rich. When he was my age, he bought a schooner and sailed to the Arctic. From the beginning, my grandfather had everything going for him. He went to the best schools, was trained in all the finer arts, and was introduced to all the right people. His father had started from scratch. He founded a company in 1886 that was called Johnson & Johnson. It wasn't long before the Johnson brothers were two of the richest men in America. It sure seemed like my grandfather had an ideal life. If only he'd known then about the trouble ahead. By the end of his days, my grandfather had managed.
So this is the thing I think that needs to be understood. Now, what did he say? My grandfather started from scratch. Okay? He didn't say that his grandfather was some poor, peasant. He just said he started from scratch, right? So every single senator and all these guys all say the same thing. My family came from this, right? But you you gotta just say, okay, well, it was the you're talking about the 1800s, right? So you're gonna look like that. Whatever picture you bring up, you're probably gonna be on a farm or you're gonna be some rural location, right? These guys pretend that their family came from nothing, and yet they're they are the bloodline. So it's not like the bloodline was somehow separated and suddenly appeared a Rockefeller or appeared, right? And again, starting from scratch simply means what? They did something. They wanted to do this. They wanted to build an empire. And back then, think about the choices, right? I want to, for the Trumps, I want to build up one of the boroughs of New York. I mean, that was a possibility back then because it wasn't built yet, right? So you got to think of this as what did they want to do or what were they expected to do? Yeah, they started from scratch. Great. Does that mean they weren't completely backed and 100% guaranteed of success? No. See, that's
Right.
the difference between them and everybody else in the world.
Yeah, notice how he said he starts from scratch, but he knew all the right people, had all the right connections. So, especially back then, it was much harder to network, especially in upper echelons if you're coming from nothing.
But they were still building this thing, this, I mean, the Civil War was not that long ago. It was a couple, generations dead. I the, they were building from nothing because I mean, think about the Great Depression. All this stuff. I mean, these things didn't happen that long ago. So yeah, there were probably some poor so-called, family members, but doesn't mean that they're going to stay that way or that they're not, almost guaranteed to be successful if they do something.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, they always like to insert the humble beginnings.
Yeah, always. It's getting
Just
old.
because you say you started from scratch doesn't mean that eventually, because I see a lot of times in these families they'll kick the kid out once they're 18, kind of like the Amish do. They kick them out, let them go about the world, and then they kind of go through that experience, and then they come back, right?
Mhm.
So might be something similar
Sink
like
himself
that.
and his family into the kind of problems only truly mastered by the very rich. Ugly estate battles, bitter divorces, brutal publicity, and family ties undone by business rivalries. I've heard plenty of stories like my grandfather's, and I have a feeling that I'm not the only rich kid a little worried about the voodoo of inherited wealth. But the thing is, nobody wants to talk about money. It's like this big taboo always lurking under the surface. That's why I want to ask other kids who were born rich about that one subject everybody knows it's not polite to talk about.
Look, Jamie, this firm, we have represented your family for years, for years. I can't in good conscience recommend to the kinds of people you want to talk to about the kinds of things you want to talk about that they participate in the film. They have to be nuts. I mean, you're dealing with families that have always made it gospel that you don't talk about your money. And now you want to put them in a film that, I don't know how, I'm not surprised that you're having trouble getting people.
Before I say anything, I just want to say that I am really, really reluctant to do this. And I really don't like talking to this thing at all. And I dislike you both immensely as a result of the fact.
If Luke is any indication of what it's going to be like trying to get my friends to talk, then this is going to be more of an adventure than I expected.
I mean, I have sort of apprehensions, first of all, about being on, in a film, like, about a bunch of rich kids. Like, maybe it's more than that. I understand that it represents, like, a particular sort of, niche that maybe, most of the world doesn't really recognize, and that way it's significant. But, I would worry about, like, my parents seeing it, I would worry about some of my friends seeing it. I think, some of them would think that my involvement in it was inappropriate. Essentially just kind of the notion of talking about, one's wealth, describing a bunch of people's wealth, it's just kind of tacky. My father's in the gaming industry. They do sports and horse racing. They supply the equipment and security and everything. So they do all the betting at Belmont and, Churchill Downs is where the Kentucky Derby's held, at the Preakness. And then they do all the hotels in Vegas or Atlantic City in terms of sports betting. It's a pretty big business. My father told me to...
Sports betting.
My father told me to...
The fixed sports betting, right? Shit. You're muted.
Oh, exactly. I mean, who's to say that he even said they're involved with it's a whole vertical operation. They're on the bet side, and then they're on the racing side itself. That's security. So who's to say that they could influence the race in many different ways?
Well, I mean, it's a known entity at this point. I mean, someone finally wrote a book about it, admitting to it all. I don't remember what it was called, but I mean, I learned just because I worked in in Tahoe as a freaking blackjack dealer. I learned that the whole thing's rigged. We're looking at the sports book, going, "What the hell is going on here?" Um, the whole, I mean, games are altered. The last minute there's a couple touchdowns that you're like, "What the hell's going on here?" Yeah, they're fixing the point spread. I mean, that's it's so obvious when you see it, but until you see it, right? Until you see or you actually hear from the wrestler himself that professional wrestling is fake, you might not be as, wow, look at these acrobatics, but I mean, the thing is with these people, they are the artificers. They are the creators of all these artificial things. So they're not only fixing the game to secure the betting industry, which they are, you know, they're paying these professional players and representing them through agencies like the NFL, which are private associations, right? And NBA, all that. They rep them. They pay them a lot of money to keep their mouths shut, right? So I mean, they've got a corner on the entire thing, but you have to really see it for what it is, which is the whole thing is one fixed giant thing to make money by betting off the industry, betting off the games. And of course, they teach, what do they teach kids? Oh, becoming a professional sports player, for God's sake. It's just the whole thing is it's so. I guess the point is because later on the guy, and we won't stop it for this, but he says my family owns the subway indirectly, right? I mean, they are the owners of the New York subway. They privatized it, which tells me that okay, if we want to do any political, any kind of fight back to these guys, there's only one thing we can do: stop using what they own. The problem is, what don't they own? We're they've got monopolies on everything, and it's one giant family, so it's not like they're gonna, they don't want to talk, they don't want to tell on each other. It's impolite to talk about money. I mean, this is how the world works, and it's one. I keep saying it's one giant family. So if all your political offices, all your actors, all your CEOs, if everyone is of the bloodline, they're all benefiting from this giant sort of secretive wealth club called the Royals. What do you do? The only thing we can do is to stop using their stuff. But like I said, I mean that's a pretty tall order.
very early age that I could do whatever I wanted. You can do everyone. You can be a concert violinist for all I care, as long as you do something. As long as you do something, you're going to be set up. You don't have to worry about anything. Don't do something. You know, he didn't say at that age I might have to cut you off, but.
Sir! It would be a low estimate, a very low estimate for me to say 20 billion, but I can't get too exact with it. But in attainable assets, that's the range our family's in. My grandfather goes by Cy. His father went by SI. I'm my father's oldest son, so I'm SI number 4. And my great grandfather had bought a group of magazines.
Notice how these families, you'll never see them on the Forbes top richest list, right? And this was made in the early 2000s. So back then he was saying his share of the pie was 40 bill. Imagine what that is in today's money. And remember, they're mostly invested in stock. So imagine how much their stock allocations have increased. I mean, his share of the pie is well above Elon Musk's net worth of 300 billion.
But you also have to take into consideration, I covered this in my first documentary, which is the infrastructure privatization bill, which allowed them to start selling off, why your parking meter's so high. Oh, that's because they're owned by a bank now, and the bank is charging you all kinds of money to park. It's a public-private partnership. The bank doesn't own them, but it controls them. It runs them, and of course, that's going to go up the chain, to pay off the family that owns the bank. And in every case, that's exactly what it is. So they own. Let me say that again. They've privatized the administration and management of all the for-profit things that are in government, right? Uh, Toll lanes, schools, hospitals, all these different things they've privatized to the point where they're no longer benefiting the public, but only benefiting the profiteers. And so, yeah, they own stock, which is one way they control, but they also control the private public partnership that is the you know the companies that actually run things on behalf of and are in contract. That is them. So they're getting it. I mean, they're literally being douched in every hole with money. I mean, they're being filled with money on a constant basis coming from us because we're the ones paying for the services that have been sold out to banks and other entities that are private. So these guys, they are the beneficiaries of this setup where everything has been privatized, and the government came out very clearly and said we're going to privatize all this stuff. So I mean, it was planned that way, and that was back in 2010 when I did my documentary. Imagine how much has happened, and just in this 13 years. Oh, I shudder to imagine. I mean, I remember at the time Chicago was paying like $25 an hour to park, or 10 minutes or something, park, in a parking meter, and I'm like, well, yeah, that's because they don't limit these corporations. They control it from all angles. The only angle they don't control is uh, you know, our our moral ability to say, okay, well, we're not going to support you anymore by using your shit. But again, how is that ever going to happen? Imagine the control or the things that people could get done if they started actually saying, okay, well, if this family owns the betting industry or owns the football teams or owns this, well, let's boycott these things. We don't have to boycott everything at once, but if we wanted something as a people, You don't go to government. You start boycotting these people and their ownership, participation, and ability to make money from all that. Just cut off their supply, and suddenly they're a lot more concerned about money than these people that you're seeing here, who have no concern
Under
because they're
a
born
label
into
called Condé Nast. I don't remember what was in it originally, so I'm just going to name them all. Is that okay? I don't have enough fingers. Vogue, Allure, Vanity Fair, GQ, Self, Glamour, House and Garden, Condé Nast Traveler, Architectural Digest, Bon Appetit, Gourmet, Wired, New Yorker, and I'm sure there's a couple I missed, which in any other family you'd think would lay a lot of pressure on my shoulders. They say, you're the oldest, you're the namesake. But it doesn't work that way in my family. You got to earn your way. If you don't go to school, at least somewhat, and if you don't work for the family and put in your time, you don't get shit.
Hey, how you doing? Very good. You're looking great. It's therapeutic. You go to the shrink, you talk about yourself, and then you figure out things. Same thing, you go to the tailor, and you still talk about yourself, and you figure out other things. It's my shrink. There are not many people like myself in modeling. I see and had friends that really got me into it. They almost coerced me into it. I kept hearing it from. Many sides. Try it.
The last picture looked like a lesbian to you? I thought that was kind of funny.
Well, yeah, and then I mean, here's a perfect example. Apparently, he's model material, and what did they say before? If the same guy said the same thing, you got to do something. I don't care what you do, but you got to do something. You can't just sit back and spend the family's money and not do something, right? Well, here's a kid who figured out, oh, I could have the family's money. I could be a celebrity by being a model. I will be guaranteed success, even though I'm pretty average looking, right? I'm gonna be a model because that's what I'm doing something, right? Plus, I get all these free clothes and all. So, I mean, good pick is what I'm saying. It's like if you're gonna do something, I guess that would be the thing to do, right?
Well, you'll later see that his family's not too happy with that show.
Almost coerced me into it. I kept hearing it from many sides. Try it. Why not try it? And finally, I did. Lauren Hutton, who's a friend of mine, gave me the idea. Isabella Rossellini once said, yes, I called me out. Some other members of my family think it's a step down being a whore, which for a man, I think it is. I did it purposely. It's the other end of the spectrum for me. I've always been very introspective and interested in culture and things like that. And this is something on the surface completely. And I'm purposely doing it to explore that side. No, let's go pressarlo un attimo.
Oh yeah, questo qui sì. Okay.
Pressarlo qua. Lapels, you see they're high. There's nothing worse when you see these jackets with these lapels that go like this. You see? Are low riding. Clinton wears this kind of thing. Have you seen? It looks like a restaurant somewhere. It's so vulgar. This is has an aristocratic thing to it, no?
Well, I think no matter what I hear about my parents, about my family, no matter what I read, the fact is that I'm absolutely, proud to be a Trump. And I'm, proud of my family name, and I'm proud of everything they've done and ever accomplished. My grandfather, somebody was telling me, had built more housing units than anyone else has ever done in New York. And he was just in the other boroughs. So to my dad, it was sort of, he wanted to go in the direction of his father. He just always loved Manhattan, so he wanted to build here. There's some sort of pride in the fact that people would even take an interest in me just because I'm a part of them. So, for a while I was worried that, for my whole life.
That is the creation of a monster right there.
But again, I mean, look at her. I mean, so I know that her business, along with the family, is steeped in China, and it's relies on that type of labor market and everything. So I mean, it's the same. Whatever she chose to do, she was going to be successful, right? Whatever Trump senior, which is actually junior to another senior, right? Whatever he chose to do, he was gonna be successful. He just happened to he was smart and he just did what his father did.
Right.
Plus, I mean, hell, see, we get Linkos and Leakin logs for Christmas, right? He gets the ability to make a whole building in Manhattan, right? What a difference in gifts, right? I mean, it's like, so I you can't give these people any credit for what they've done except for the fact that the world looks like it does because of them, but not because it was some fair market, or so I guess is the point, right? They got to design the world kind of how they wanted it to look. I guess that's why it looks like shit.
Yeah, well, and people often forget that uh, the Trump we know now, he got a loan from his dad. I think it was around 10 million.
I've sort of be under my parents' shadow, but it's not a bad shadow to be under, I guess. So it's okay.
I mean, growing up, everything just seems normal. You go to a museum, you're like, yeah, that's me, that's my family, you know? And don't you have a family museum? The money from my family is kind of complicated. On my
Don't you have a family museum?
the
I mean, doesn't everybody have a family museum? Oh shit.
Would even take an interest in me just because I'm a part of them. So, for a while I was worried that, for my whole life I've sort of.
I mean, growing up, everything just seems normal. You go to a museum, you're like, yeah, that's me, that's my family, you know? And don't you have a family museum? The money from my family.
Notice this. This is an example of how they intermarry. Look, Vanderbilt and Whitney, the biggest families in New York. I mean, that is the example of New York old money, right?
Yeah, my family museum is sitting, I think, in my parents' living room, under the coffee table. It's a bunch of pictures of, bunch of Polaroids.
Right. Yeah, so we got the railroad dynasty
Yes.
to the I can't remember what the Whitneys did, but I know they own.
Family is kind of complicated. On my grandfather's side of the family, uh, his grandmother was Gertrude Vanderbilt. The Vanderbilts made their money in shipping and railroads. And Gertrude Vanderbilt married a guy named Harry Payne Whitney, who was the son of William C. Whitney, who was a very famous New York financier. Gertrude was a bohemian type, kind of going off to Paris and getting sculpture lessons by Rodin. And in the early 1900s, had gone downtown and tried to help out struggling American artists, and in the process formed the Whitney Museum. I always take the subway. Like, my mom had never really been on the subway. I took her on the other day, and she was like, whoa, this is cool. Other people should do this. I was like, you should come during rush hour, you know? It's kind of ironic, because the Whitney family made their money off of subways. Yeah, they sort of privatized the subways and held a monopoly on it, charged the city all this money. It was a complete racket. They were crooks. But everybody was a crook back then who made money. The Johnsons, right? Terrible.
Wow. The Johnsons were crooks. Huh? Imagine knowing that your I mean, Trump knows it. He's in the casino business, but imagine knowing that your entire family line are a bunch of basically criminal element that run the organized criminal element that is government, and of course finance, and of course the construction industry, and You know, everything that goes. He's. I mean, the guy just told you that the world is run by crooks and private association.
Right. He said everyone were crooks. As if anything's changed.
Even the Johnson.
I didn't always know I was rich. I know it sounds a little strange to say that, but growing up in the country, I just thought that everybody had carriages and horses and stuff like that. My parents never sat me down and said, "You're rich." In fact, my dad never talked about his inherited wealth at all. That's why it was so weird when I did find out. I was 10 years old. It was in 4th grade. During a free reading period in a library, a kid in my class found my dad's name in a copy of Forbes magazine with a list of the 400 richest people in America. The kid read the article aloud to the whole class, and everyone, including my teacher, ran over to check it all out for themselves. It was strange, all my friends and me finding out at the same time how rich my family was. I felt like I was learning a secret that I wasn't supposed to know, a secret my dad had been keeping from me. And
Hey, Brandon.
Yeah.
This is from the Wisconsin Department of Justice. Okay. Drug distributors and Johnson and Johnson commit to $26 billion opioid agreement. This is 20 February February 2022. Madison, Wisconsin. Attorney General announced today the final approval of the $26 billion opioid agreement with the nation's three major pharmaceutical distributors, Cardinal McKesson and Amerisource Bergen, and Johnson and Johnson. Following successful state sign-in and subdivision sign-on periods, the defendants will start releasing funds to a national administrator on April 2nd, 2022. Money will start flowing to state and local governments in the second quarter of 2022. The hundreds of millions of dollars coming to Wisconsin as a result of this agreement will significantly strengthen Wisconsin's ability to fight the opioid crisis. With these funds, communities across the state will be able to do more to prevent addiction and to support people with substance use disorder. Now, I'd like to go and see what they've done with that money. $26 billion, and you know, is that going to families whose sons or daughters or husbands or wives or fathers died of some opioid? No, it's not. There, where does it go? It goes to government, where they put it into an investment fund and make more money while they spread out the distribution. I mean, this is just organized crime. You know, you say, okay, it's a fee to the company. Really, it's not. It's like Johnson's and Johnson and all these it's their way of paying for their privilege. It's not helping anybody who's been affected by opioids or who died from it. It's going to a government frickin' fund. I mean, that's how corrupt. What what is the point of this? And we'll ask that till we're dead in the face, until we realize they control government, they control the regulator, they are the manufacturer, they are the one that's killing people, and they own the justice system. I mean, this is how the world runs.
and now, the fact that I'm making a film about it has him really nervous.
Sometimes prying into people's lives with a camera and revealing things that are sensational creates ill will and
yeah, but I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where I want to have a happier life and how I actually feel about myself more in a psychological, introspective way. And I don't want to be nervous about money or be nervous about who I am. And I feel like you're feeling nervous about this film is maybe that nervousness of who you are.
And you're in control of this film, and I'm not. So there's a little source of nervousness.
What do you think about my theory that you have that nervousness and that anxiety that I'm trying to avoid and maybe understand and overcome?
Perhaps I do. And maybe you will overcome it. Maybe you can walk into school, into a group of people, feel perfectly at home and comfortable and that you belong, or have as much right to be there as anybody else.
You think you made a mistake and you don't want me to make the same mistakes you did?
Maybe.
The time I realized I was wealthy was ironically at Friends Seminary in New York City, which is a Quaker school. I say ironically because Quakers are supposed to be nice and like not evil acting. But apparently there's one of those parent meeting things, and some kid, her father must have told her, oh, that guy, his family owns a lot of stuff and newspapers, and they're really mean and whatnot. And, she went and told everybody that I thought I was all into myself, and I don't know, I guess at that point, these kids were intelligent enough to think that, that made me a braggart or something. And they beat the crap out of me at a Quaker school. So that was my first realization of that. And also allowed me to also realize that I didn't like my father so much because I came home all screwed up and he didn't even notice. So
There were times as I grew older that I became more conscious of it by the way people treated me because I had money. It wasn't even my money. I was a little kid. It was people, I'd noticed people treating me differently because my parents had money. So that even, one more step removed. So I never really understood that because I couldn't give them my parents' money. So I didn't really think there was a reason to treat me in a different way. But I think that's why in friends that I have now, the major quality I look for is sincerity, because I think there is a lot of that. And I didn't realize it when I was younger because I was quite sheltered, but now I see it, so.
I remember, being picked up from school to go on holidays in a limousine being this huge thing. I remember being so upset with my father when, he would do that. I remember, making him either park around the block, and I would scurry down the street and around the corner. And that's a true story. I really did that a couple times. I remember just being no, I'm not rich. I don't have any money. Really telling people that. Making an effort to identify with maids working in our house or babysitters or, whoever. And trying to convince them as though there was any, they were living in our house, for Christ's sakes,
My dad brought us up, always telling us we were poor. We never were given too many presents, and I didn't know anything about the Vanderbilts or the Whitneys. I didn't know anything about it, and I remember when I was a little kid, my mom let me spend the day with my uncle, and he took me to Grand Central Station, and he said, "This is yours." I mean, it's just the worst thing. He'd just take me all around New York and be like, "Yes, we own this." And it was the dumbest thing in the world to do to a kid. This is something that some people in my family did a long time ago. I never knew them. My mom never knew them. My grandfather didn't even know the people who came up with this idea. I'm not making money off of Grand Central Station or anything.
I didn't grow up like Josiah with statues of my family in front of Grand Central Station. I don't even know that much about how my family started their business, and I really don't know anything about how it still runs today. In fact, none of my relatives have worked at Johnson & Johnson since my grandfather's generation. All I know about it is that ever since I was a kid, I've heard this rumor that they have a company store in there where employees can get anything they want for half price. Even though my name's on the package, I'm just a shareholder and a customer, so I pay retail, just like everybody else.
These are the new rage, right? These glasses. Okay, ready for me to look totally retarded? Because yellow is not my color. We'll go ahead anyway. I'm a handbag guru, personally, because it's like the easiest thing to shop for when you're not really shopping and you're just running in. And you just go and you buy it and you don't realize how expensive it is. And then it kind of adds up and you have like two huge, like shelves worth of bags.
So notice that she doesn't even care about the price when she shops.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, that's the most important aspect because, I mean, this is almost like in childhood induced psychopathy. Like this is like sociopathic behavior, even if they're not. Technically mentally that way. So I mean, you're raising a generation of psychopaths essentially that just pretend to fit in and can have anything they want at any time. It's just and I think that's they pretty much teach them. The only thing they really teach them is how not to be so inured and addicted to spending that they spend the whole fortune. I think that's that control of the fortune is what they. It's all their whole life is centered around the control of the fortune, and that has to be just such a bizarre. As opposed to us worrying about whether we're going to have a fortune in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and we'll later go through, and you'll see in this film later, and we'll kind of expound on it, how they have the mechanisms in place to control the family wealth. So this girl doesn't spend it all, because she totally would.
I think this is so classic. It's just a little bag. You stick everything in. It can hold makeup kit. It can hold your Palm Pilot, or if you're still into paper, your diary. And then, of course, you also have the bigger one so you can fit your little dog in it. My dad's German, but he was born here in New York. He went to collegiate and then went to put himself through Columbia and then went to Harvard Law School. He was a lawyer and is like self-employed now. And so I was always raised lap of luxury in New York, totally lucky, going to private schools my entire life and kind of having whatever I want, but always knowing that if you ever lose it all you have is this.
I'm a German Baron and Italian Viscount.
And how does that happen exactly?
Well, because my great-grandfather was Kaiser Wilhelm II, and it just means, when you come from an old family and, hundreds of years ago, you're either related to a royal family or, somebody in your family, like in the Middle Ages, clubbed somebody on the head and king made you, a baron, a duke or whatever, 800 years ago, 1,000 years ago. And then, it's just sort of the way the family's progressed. And it's just a question of, manners and it's not even that. It's just like, the difference between old money and new money.
Right.
Wow, come on. So nice that side.
So as you can see, there's not much audience for fencing, aside from the fences themselves. It's kind of...
Did you see that? He was like, what do I do? This is a commoner. He's supposed to bow to me. But okay, I'll fist bump. This is before COVID.
You with the other. Roger, do I hang out with the fencing team? Yeah, you hang out with the fencing team. I hang out with the fencing team. Everyone's very nice here because fencing just attracts people who aren't that outgoing, who don't have that much they need to prove, guys who don't shout and scream all the time. Go Ford! Go you Ford! All right, Nathaniel! Whoa! Shit.
A lot of people who know me know, what my financial situation is, and they do ask me a lot. They wonder, why do I stay here on campus? They think I have something better to go home to, like a mansion or my apartment off campus or something. And I do have a place in the city, my father's place, but it's not fun to go there. and I feel a guest in my own home. So I stay here, and I made this place my own, and my friends don't always understand that, and they have their own idea of how a wealthy person or person from a wealthy background would live. This is my place. This is in Lloyd at Haverford. It's senior housing. That's a Lloyd double, so I have 2 rooms, mine and my roommates, and we have a suite, and it's nice. I keep all the things I want. It got foods.
$20 says his father said, if you want the fortune, you got to go live like the commoners do. You got to experience what it is to be poor so that you never think to do a movie like this.
I highly doubt it was his own idea.
Yeah. Oh well. Yeah. I mean, you just. So, oh sure, I'm friends with the team. Yeah.
Oh yeah. He tried to convince us.
Stuff which we're kind of out of, and enough liquor to service at least 2 people. It's certainly a far cry from what I've got at my father's place in the city, but this is really it for me. This is where I feel safe and feel in control of things. When I go to New York, that's just doesn't feel like my life anymore.
Okay, this is a room that nobody's probably walked into for the past 10 plus years. It's a little time capsule, if you notice by the Madonna clock and my interesting attempt at color painting, the homage to Poison and Motley Crue, the 90210 posters, little, I think they were trading cards that were stickers, and the Bon Jovi sort of wall. This was my bed. It's a little small.
This is Trump's jack-off room, probably.
The Ben Jovi.
For me now. Probably why I don't stay in here anymore, but yeah.
And what floor are we on?
We are on the 68th floor. Not a bad view to wake up to.
Things really changed more when I went away to secondary school, went to St. Paul's. I was really into experimenting and different drugs and drinking, and so I was just kind of a mess. I was weird. I mean, some of my friends tell me about how I used to just go off in the woods and climb up to the very top of a tree and sort of make weird noises and scare people.
I mean, the first time I tried LSD was the summer between 6th and 7th grade. And I look at some of the crap some of my friends were involved in. Like this whole gangster thing that we all went through. Like our incredibly precocious drug habits that we just made it, such a point of flaunting to the world. Not that I was against the drug habits. I mean, I was one of the more precocious. These are, 2 small elite New York private schools, and then at St. Paul's, this boarding school, which is just a bastion of historical.
So notice that he said St. Paul, the other guy said St. Paul, and I believe even the other guy said St. Paul. So they all go to the same schools.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's tradition.
Right.
Snobbery. I mean, it's just all there, If you ever have an encounter that rubs you the wrong way, something ever pisses you off.
Who do you think? Why is that school or boarding school? Why does it exist? Because of the contributions of these families. Thus, their children are guaranteed again to go. So again, you have the nepotism. You have the. This is so outside of our understanding of things that it just goes on without like you said, it's not something that most people know.
This is their Hogwarts.
And I'm up at boarding school, and this kid's from like some shit town in Connecticut. I don't know. I can just say, fuck you, I'm from New York. I can buy your family, piss off. And this is petty, and this is weak, and this is very underhanded, but it's so easy,
My parents had come up to visit me during Parents' Weekend of that fall, which sort of coincided with my 18th birthday. And my dad brought up all this paperwork, things I had to sign. I had to look over my will, things I'd never thought about before. And this,
Mind you, when he says will, he's most likely talking about a trust. He just doesn't know what the difference is. And let's say, even if it was a will, there's something called the pour-over will that goes in conjunction with the trust.
this was a time when I was trying to think about college, what I wanted to do after high school. The idea that I was a millionaire, knowing I was a millionaire, it's kind of hard to accept, I think, when you're a kid and you haven't done anything yet, but you have all of this. And while all you have other friends who don't have anything. They just have their little checking account with the money they earned from summer jobs. Put it this way, I'm a multi-millionaire. I have an income in the high six figures minimum per year. And then I make roughly $50,000 a year in my current job.
To St. Paul's, I drove up with the chairman of the board of trustees from there. Like, he was my dad's best friend at the time. You know, like, the second day of school, like, the headmaster, who every student hated because he was such a prick, came up to me and personally introduced himself. Just like things like these, you tend to notice, you know? And then Brown, like, forget about it. Like, I mean, I think on some level I got in there on my own merit. I had really good boards. I had really good grades in high school. That's almost incidental because I feel pretty sure I would have gone there anyways. I attended an entire my first academic year, I think less than 8 academic obligations total. And that includes tests and exams. So including tests and exams, I physically got up and went somewhere for something having to do with class less than 8 times. You know, and I get these like, you know, kind of really evasive letters from deans saying, though you are technically, you know, below the number of credits, you know, required, you know, for continuing education at Brown University, we do feel that with continued academic progress, you will da-da-da-da and da-da-da. I'm just like, oh, Jesus. You guys can't throw me out, can you? Like, this is ridiculous.
Meanwhile, you know, so many kids with absolute top grades, especially white kids, can't get into schools. You know, it's just like, what the hell? You know, and he knows it. You see, that's the thing. You can't throw me out, you bastard.
You only did 8 things per year? It's pretty hilarious.
You know, so again, like, you know, great, phenomenal.
I showed up at Trinity College in the fall of 1994 for a couple weeks, and college was just out of control. I'd had all these problems with depression, and you know, I was quitting the sports teams and sitting around in my room and not really reading the books I was supposed to be reading in school. And my parents came up and we both decided that I was going to take some time off. You know, at first I thought it was going to be a semester or 2 or the whole year. And it ended up being about 2 years. Probably the best 2 years of my life.
Notice that. He wasn't really depressed. He just didn't want to do anything for 2 years.
Well, the other thing is you got to consider that these people, people just like what we're seeing, are your politicians, right? These are your senators and your congressmen, right? These are your presidents. These are your CEOs. These people who have no pretty much empathy for the common, you know, people.
Most important years of my life. One of the jobs I had was working in an oil field services company down in Texas. I was working with Cajuns and Hispanic guys who'd never even been to high school. And here I was, this kid who'd been to all these fancy boarding schools, and I was an alien to them. And it was hard at first, but I think they also learned some things from me. You know, lunchtimes, they'd always be asking me all these questions and kind of trivia questions. They
God, hear this guy talk.
Get a kick out of that.
You know what it sounds like? I mean, this is how a friend of mine talked when he went to Africa. and they gave him basically, which I think is disgusting, but they gave him basically free range to just shoot a bunch of animals because there's so many overpopulated animals, and then they use the meat, for food and stuff. But and he's talking about the Africans like they're this lower subspecies. I mean, that's essentially what this kid is doing, and it's horrible.
I knew a lot of these things. I knew a lot of these things. To know what the capital of Chile is or something. In my mind, I knew it was Santiago, but I went on a fly fishing trip with my dad down there in the mountains, and I'm going around on helicopters, going from.
I need pause there, because this is like, I learned. Hey, I learned the capital of Zambia in high school. Oh, yeah, I know it too because of personal experience. I've been there. Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, we don't know what privilege is. You can't say white people are privileged, but you can say these people are, certainly.
Exactly.
Pool to pool. Really, what I learned is that working hard makes me feel good.
When my dad was my age, he thought he'd have a career at Johnson & Johnson. But my grandfather told him he couldn't work there because he didn't want family issues interfering with business. Plus, he knew that my dad would never need to earn a living. I guess at that point, my dad could have just gone on permanent vacation. But for some reason, he didn't. Like my dad, I'll never need to work. And I'm not much of a painter. So I want to ask him what he thinks I should do with my life.
After graduation, you might pursue the filming a little bit, but you might also get interested in graduate school, further studies, building a collection of historic documents, papers, publications. And
as a career?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, this is a beauty. This is a map. This is one of my favorites. Map of Washington Township. My God. Look at that. And look at the way this little tiny portion of pink down in the lower right corner outlines the lot and the block.
I don't know. Collecting old maps seems pretty cool, but I don't exactly see where the career part comes into it.
Hand colored?
Oh, yeah.
The bottom line is, I gotta do something.
An example of this before?
And there are no courses in college about how to be a hardworking and productive rich person. It's something you gotta figure out for yourself.
Well, considering I don't have to work, what advice would you give me on?
Then don't work. Then don't work. Why would anybody in their right mind work unless they had to?
I personally do not believe at all in any moral obligation for anyone. But I've seen that people with money that don't do anything aren't happy. A great philosopher called Schopenhauer says, "What the poor are limited by their poverty, it is the duty of the rich to cultivate themselves in their idle time. And if they use their own riches for this, they can reach the highest elevation."
Class has always existed in humankind. You have denied it as a culture, not to be supercilious and look down from an older culture, but really you're discovering it just now.
Well, first I went to Wellesley thinking that I was going to work really hard and I wasn't going to get paid anything because I was going to be a doctor. Even though I was having fun the whole time, I was realizing that my credit card bills were mounting in college, and I realized, okay, this is not the way for me to be. why don't I go try investment banking? Got to investment banking. They work you to the ground. The first day I got there was 7 in the morning. They didn't let us leave till 10 o'clock at night. And I was like, yeah, welcome to Merrill Lynch and welcome.
I don't think she knew what she was getting into. I got friends that are involved with investment banking, and it's exactly what she says. You're working 80-hour weeks. I mean, it's just, you're a pencil pusher. So this was just a little fun experiment for her.
Well, I think that's what everything is. It's an experiment in, I mean, it's almost like the parents are trying to teach them some form of empathy or acknowledgement of all these people that are basically producing them this wealth. It's almost like, yeah, go and experience what real life would be.
To working your butt off. But I enjoyed it. I learned a lot about finance. I learned certain skills, how to interact with clients. That was my best skill. Like, I got handwritten notes from CEOs of companies saying I was great.
I doubt that was her own merit, and more so of her last name.
Yeah, the CEO of the company that your father owns is not going to say your daughter sucks. I mean, come on.
Right.
He probably is being paid to promote.
Great. I was fabulous. Ever need anything, call them. But I didn't have the drive anymore. Like, I saw these people that would just sit there and sit there and sit there. And I was like, my friends are downtown Cipriani right now. It's 10 o'clock at night. They're having Bellinis. And like, I'm sitting here cranking out numbers that are never going to get looked at. And that's where I drew the line. I was like, I need a normal life. I can be successful between the hours of 9 and 7 or 8 o'clock at night and then go out and have a good time.
And it's so funny. I'm not going to be. Turns out I don't want to be like the commoners.
Notice she said I wanted a normal life.
I went to lunch with my mother. That was gonna be like a nice family lunch. Ooh. Oh no. Okay. And suddenly, as like I'm about to leave to go to the gym, she's like, "We need to talk." I'm like, "Uh-oh." She's like, "What are these bills I see on my credit card?" She just wants me to respect what I buy. Like that. Even though we do have like a privilege, and are in New York, and you are doing all these fabulous things, and famous people wear it. That at the end of the day, you realize not everybody is as lucky to have what we have and to be able to stroll down Madison Avenue and go in and buy a pair of $600 shoes if you really wanted to. A lot of people, that's like unheard of.
See, the people running the Louis Vuittons, the Dolce & Gabbanas, they are geniuses for selling to people just like this.
And there's also a certain, the resale value, if you will, right? The value that used stuff keeps. It is pretty brilliant marketing scheme, but also it's also a way of keeping it in the family again.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I came here, it just shocked me that every time you go somewhere, people ask you when you meet someone. The second question even is, what do you do right away? Where you live, and what do you do? And in Europe, that doesn't happen. People find out who you are and what do you do by the way you speak, your intonation, your subject of conversation. So I never really knew what to do because I don't do anything. So I didn't know what to really answer. This is a more romantic telephone. Sort of sensual. It takes a long time. So it has a whole. So you already know you're making this phone call. Whereas this one is sort of quick, sturdy. That's more for business, and each one has a different, connotation. I would have to say I'm rich, or I would just say that very simply. Or sometimes I'm kept if I was in a bad mood. And I think it's something that always made me feel good to answer back that way because it would make people understand that it is something that is make them understand the nature of the question, that it is unpleasant in itself.
This is the Britannica 11th edition, which is in 33 volumes, but thin. And this is the last edition that was written before it became, from 1911, before it got completely rewritten and became, for the masses. I mean, now the Encyclopedia Britannica is, shit. In my...
For the masses.
Well, I mean, maybe that's something we should look to get. What was the year?
Ah, go back.
Britannica 11th edition, which is in 33 volumes, but thin, and this is the last edition that was written before it became from 1911, before it got completely rewritten and became, for the masses. I have to say I'm rich, or I would just say that very simply, or sometimes I'm kept if I was in a bad mood. And I think it's something that always made me feel good to answer back that way, because it would make people understand that it is something that is, make them understand the nature of the question, that it is unpleasant in itself. This is the Britannica 11th edition, which is in 33 volumes, but thin, and this is the last edition that was written before it became, from 1911, before it got completely rewritten and became, for the masses. I mean, now the Encyclopedia Britannica is, shit. In my will and wish for cultivation and culture is, sort of the Dionysian side, love and sex. And so I find it very often that I'm reading a book and I'm thinking about pussy, but then as soon as I get the pussy, I'm thinking about a book. So for me, it is very problematic that.
I've sold maybe 15 paintings, and I sold paintings to Denise Rich. I did a portrait for Princess Farrell Jordan, Mandolina Theotokopoulos,
So her family members.
Alexandra.
Look at the quality, or I should say lack thereof. Why did you sell these pictures? Because
Right.
of your artwork, all right? Because no, come on. How embarrassing that must actually feel in reality. It's kind of like the other kid. He said, "I only felt good when I worked hard." Well, here's someone who's selling art because of her name. That's gotta
Right.
feel like shit.
You gotta wonder if she's in total denial of it or not.
I don't know if it's denial again as much as just sociopathy. Like,
Yeah.
isn't everybody able to sell their art for millions of dollars?
Von Furstenberg. I just did one of Alex and Talita von Furstenberg. This one is very sort of Basquiat.
What does that say?
She doesn't even have to be original. She literally said it's like Basquiat.
It's so horrible. I mean, but as you said, I think you brought up the point of art. They control the art world, so they will say, "Well, okay, so you want to be an artist? Okay, well, we're gonna make sure that your paintings are worth millions of dollars, even though they are complete shit."
That's why I never thought it was worth it to pursue the art world. I was seriously considering it in my younger years, and yeah.
I mean, this actually kind of shows that it is worth it if you know what the art world actually is. But I don't think I think when most people look and I'll use my mom as the classic example, my dad, they just look at some of this modern art and shit, and they're just like, they know it's crap. I mean, they know that there's no beauty behind it, that it's the inversion of what is good. And I think instinctively, maybe they know that it's because the art market is controlled by the people who create the crappy art, and therefore crap instead of beauty is promoted. And it actually starts to make sense that if a bunch of sociopathic, psychopathic, absolutely, these people, a lot of them probably do drugs or other kind of things because they have an unlimited supply. Well, this explains why art is shit. It explains why architecture has become shit, right? I mean, it explains so much, really, if you think about it.
Yeah, film, yeah, every medium. But I heard from one of the most prominent artists in New York today, Lucian Smith. He said the art world is uh, the art world is arts and crafts for the billionaires.
It's Dolce and Gabbana for in art. I mean, again, they're supporting each other. I mean, it's almost she's, if we get really down to it, she's like a charity case. Like,
Yes.
okay, I chose art. I probably shouldn't have. So the parents are like, hey, we're going to have an auction. You're going to buy my daughter's art because you owe me the money anyway, or whatever. It's just, this is just so, this shows the ridiculousness of all of culture. And notice the magazines that guy listed off. They were all
Right.
completely. I mean, one of them was called Vanity. I mean, it
Yeah.
was. It's like the celebration of the whatever number sin, right? The GQ. It's all about image and right. And and
Vogue.
and of course they're the ones saying okay. And then you think, okay, well, the advertisements in that magazine are all going to be their family members and their right. I chose to be a clothing designer. I chose to be. You're going to make it, and it also. I mean, look at the clothes that are designed for these runway shows. No, again, I use my mom or someone as the example where they're just like, "What the hell am I looking at?" That no, under no circumstances could you pay me to wear that, and yet here it is being celebrated. So it makes the psychotic nature of our culture kind of make a little
I
bit
will
of sense.
spend the rest of my life trying to live up to ideals I don't think I can. My great-grandfather and my two great-uncles who built the A&P lived in New Jersey. They really loved New Jersey, and that's where A&P base is. And the first one was a supermarket or a tea store, and then my two great-uncles decided to make it into a chain supermarket. I think it was the first one,
You know, they dress like
like
bankers.
Woolworth. And so there was 15,000 stores. And my father wasn't involved in the A&P. I think he worked for them for a day or something. Then he inherited the A&P money, so he bought Hog Island, he named it Paradise Island, and he developed it. Because the art collection was worth, say, 400 million, and the property in LA was worth, let's say, 400, 500 million, right? The island, of course, is worth a couple hundred million, right? And then the museum, so, and then all the houses. So I'd say a couple billion.
He lost.
And he lost or sold or gave away all that, yeah.
Gave away to his trust. Is that what she meant? Oh, but notice she said we had art collections. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, you think about all these foundations and all these things. You're right. I mean, when you say he lost it, did he really lose it? Did he lose it, for
Right.
instance? I mean, how about what if he lost it to the betting industry? Hey,
Oh.
cousin, I lost my money. Do you give it back? You know, there's just I don't think there's any limit to the
Well,
deprivation.
and she's only talking about tangible asset classes. I mean, I don't think she realizes how much equity holdings these people hold and other stuff.
Well, I
I
mean,
mean-
at least she recognizes there's wealth in all these, land and stuff. But it's just what did she say? He bought Hog Island and then called it Paradise.
I like this picture a lot. My mother's really happy here. It's with President Nixon on Paradise Island. This is a cute picture with the Beatles. Because they filmed Help on Paradise Island, so. And actually, this is actually my favorite picture of my parents. And my mother had given my father a black eye, so he'd had to wear sunglasses that day.
Oh, the subway, we own it, but we don't actually do it. It just supports our lifestyle. I mean, that's what I mean. The nepotism is frightening in cases like this because they're benefiting and having nothing to do with that which benefits them. I mean, that's really screwed up.
Well, no, she just said her mom gave her dad a black eye, and they
We
just
came
act
back
like
to New
nothing
York,
happened.
We came back to New York. We were living at the Carlisle Hotel, and I was going to the Hewitt School across the street. I used to eat salami and watch TV and talk to the servants, and it took a while,
The richest people do not make their primary home the biggest investment. Notice that they were living at the Carlisle Hotel.
I mean, it makes sense, I know I've seen people living out of hotels and never having a property because they're just experiencing life. They're a trust fund or whatever. The other thing is like what she just described was almost. I mean, it's almost like listening to a movie or something where like the cyborgs that are given false implanted memories. I remember sitting eating salami and watching television and talking to the servants. Like it's just like, oh, well, that's funny because that's what everybody else remembers too.
He didn't come downstairs, or he came downstairs, he came for half an hour. When my mother left him, she always says he started to get involved in drugs. He went down with a cast of hair to Mexico, and he started taking Quaaludes. My mother always says that she thinks my father would have been a really simple man had he not inherited the money.
Yeah, I've got all this money, and yes, if I wanted to, I could probably we could go like downtown and go buy a Ferrari or something. I could do that. I've gotten a little older and more mature, so it's not something I obsess about or think about. You know, I've been able to drive in nice cars, and I already have nice houses, and my family has a lot of nice stuff. I already have that. It doesn't really make me feel good to accumulate more.
The pleasure extinguishes itself.
Have anything you want, you don't really necessarily want anything because it's not, who cares that I can have a Lamborghini tomorrow if I wanted it. It doesn't matter. It's not gonna do anything for me.
Yeah, well, Lamborghinis. I've even heard old money people say this. I mean, that is new money behavior, is going out and buying a Lambo.
Exactly. It's because you can finally fulfill what was missing in your life, but all that was missing, or if all that's missing in your life is possession of things you can't afford, that's a pretty miserable set of goals. And this guy, instead of saying, "Well, I could go start a charity and help feed the hungry," he says I could go buy a Lamborghini.
Right, exactly. We have never heard of the charities in this whole thing, really. And another thing is, the wealthiest people, like in this echelon, they don't go and buy Lambos. That makes them stick out.
Yeah, and this is all about fitting in, right?
Exactly.
But also, like, I mean, I'll just give an example. Like, let's take a wealthy doctor that I know. He does charity work, but it's not because he's doing charity. It's because by doing charity, the hospital says, okay, we'll give you a residence here. You can perform your surgeries and make all kinds of millions of dollars. We'll use your patented things. But you have to do a certain amount of charity because we're a least minority corporation. Therefore, we have, go see some homeless people for a couple hours a month, and you fulfilled your obligation, and you can make millions. He's not being charitable. He's doing charity because he has to, and that is what their charities are. They're not there to do charity. Right? They're there to make money and promote themselves to make more money so they can make more money and promote themselves more with better commercials. They're not there, and because they own these charities, because they are part of them or give to them, which are all theirs, so they're giving to themselves again. All that's happening is it's going into an investment fund and making more money.
Well, I often have people ask me, what about family foundations? Can't we just start one and then we get out of taxes? Look, family foundations, it's not for us, all right? That's only if you're in, deca millions to hundreds of millions and plus is when foundations can be useful. But I'm telling you, people think foundations is everything when really, right. Look, you should be looking into trusts, not foundations. One step at a time, people.
Very quickly. And I find I use my time and my money to...
One last thing about the charity. It's not like they're doing this out of being gratuitous. There's massive tax benefits.
Yeah, exactly. It's all to support themselves and their family. I mean, it's just, that's the point, is there's never a good motive behind anything they do except making money and, building the estate.
Instead, do things that I take part of. For example, going to the tailor. So I go there and I break, Rocco's balls for hours because the button has to be just right, and we talk about the shape of it. And
I will admit, this is a guilty pleasure of mine. And there's nothing better than getting custom-made clothes.
Yeah, but most people can't go to the Walmart manager and say, can you please make this $2 t-shirt a little bit, more form-fitting? I'm sorry, this is privilege.
And the sewing, I mean, yes, it requires money, but it also requires setting down what you want, your taste. So it gives a meaning. I mean, this time that I spent, yes, I get the great soup, but I don't just buy it off the rack because it exactly reflects what I want.
I wouldn't trust myself with $1 million right now. If it was all, ready cash, if it was extremely accessible, I probably wouldn't trust myself with it.
Give it all to the homeless. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, that is so not cute. But yeah, I mean I think that's a good point right there. Is I'm sure that the family sets up these trusts so that the cash is not readily accessible because again, your child is not you. He's not you. There's no experience there. There's no. It's just complete irresponsibility with these people, and they're like, well, you can't
Well,
have.
we'll find out.
One guy
Yeah.
talked about being cut off if he didn't do something, whatever that
Yeah.
something
Well,
is.
and mind you, these families have irrevocable trusts set up, and that's where you have the third party trustee, and that's where they hire the trusteeship out. So therefore, none of the family has control over the money.
At this level, though, again, this is like having an agent, right?
Yeah,
That controls,
exactly.
Ivanka Trump's agent controls all her personal appearances and the photographs and everything. So I mean, these guys, yeah, okay, it's a trustee, but it's more like a portfolio manager for a public appearance.
And you'll later see.
um, let's see. I just have.
What would you do with your money if you could, if you really could, she says feed the homeless and then laughs about it, but then she thinks, because she just labeled something that would be a moral, consciously moral act. And then when she tried to think about, everything else, she's like, oh, shit, I just put myself in a hole because nothing
Right.
I would do is actually moral.
Look at that face.
Or right.
Exactly.
It's a few houses. In like the Bahamas and London and animals and playing.
Now she sounds like that Miss America, that
Yeah,
stupid,
don't rot.
that viral Miss America. Well, I think that the kids the kids in Iraq should have an and she melts down. She doesn't know what to say because this is not part of her. Empathy towards the class that supports her lifestyle is not part of her her makeup. It's just you could.
Big art studio, things like that.
No comment necessary. No comment necessary. Well, and the way they're, I mean, you'd think they'd be more like, I don't know. You think they'd look good, right? But
Right.
they're look at them.
I mean, these people got to get a stylist or something.
This is what this kind of behavior, I think, turns you into.
Yeah, exactly. You got your shorts up to your tits.
This is our barn, Gotham North. It's actually brand new. I have 8 stables here right now. This is Nadia. She's actually my youngest horse. She's 6 years old. We just bought her this year from Europe. This is Julius. He's a little crazy sometimes, but we like him anyway. This is Caristella. I do her in the high amateurs, and she's gonna be a great horse. Having the last name Bloom.
See, that's just it. These are all for profit. Again, this would be like 300 years ago. She could be saying this, or whatever, 200 years ago. She could be saying this about their choice slaves. This is Tom, and Tom's going to be working in the cotton fields. And I mean, they're talking about these as their property that are going into the races and going to make them money. I mean,
they are investments.
And because they're family with the betting industry guru, I mean, it's you start to see that. I mean, talk about. I mean, this is beyond conspiracy. This is family, you know.
Well, and look at her last name, Bloomberg, the guy who has the brand of the market databases,
And what did
terminals.
Daddy Bloomberg say to his daughter? You can do anything you want, and you'll be successful. Well, shit, then I'm gonna ride horses.
It sucks. I mean, I remember when he actually first started campaigning, and I won a big class in May at a horse show, and a few people from different magazines wanted to interview me. I sat down, and the first question they asked me was about my father, and I realized that second how it was going to be, and it has been like that, and that's really what my struggle is to have people see the person behind that name. I don't really know exactly what they see me doing in the future. My sister is kind of the business one in the family. I think that she will go to law school and become, the prize daughter. I think she is already. We're very different, and we do different things that make us happy. And I don't really
look at that ghoul nose.
care who accepts what I do or the way I act.
Well, obviously this one had a nose job.
Yeah, totally different nose now.
Yeah,
look at that.
Something looks inadequate.
She's
missing a schnauzer.
It doesn't really matter to me what the hell they think. So.
Guilt to me is idiotic. I've always found guilt to be something that has been taught us by a terrible culture of sort of a Christian Puritan culture where you're supposed to atone for some initial sin, and I find guilt absolutely senseless. So I don't.
Shit. Don't you want to just kick this guy's ass?
It's between him and the curly head guy. It's probably the most annoying.
I think the curly head guy is at least somewhat innocent in his. He's actually talking about. But this guy, man, this guy's the epitome of just. I mean, I squish your head. I just want to wring the guy's neck.
My guess is he's come from the Medici lines.
I feel bad for anything, and especially having money. I find it a very, very negative trip, and it's something that is, basically for old women and nuns. Yeah.
I remember once my father and I were walking down Fifth Avenue, and there was a homeless person sitting right outside of Trump Tower. And I think I was probably maybe 9, 10, something like this. It was around the same time as the divorce. And I remember my father pointing to him and saying, that guy has $8 billion more than me, because he was in such extreme debt at that.
This is a pretty famous clip, actually. A lot of people don't know it's from this documentary.
Well, I mean, but keep in mind that's business, right? I mean, that's how they do business. His clever use of bankruptcy is what makes him a businessman. I mean, bankrupt is a moral thing too. You're morally bankrupt. You have to be in business. I mean, you really do this kind of business. So, I'm sure that. Let's just say that when Monsanto went out of business, most of the assets were, the good things were sucked up by Bayer, and the shit was left to all the lawsuits against Monsanto were, Trump wasn't, when he said that to his daughter, he wasn't saying that as Donald Trump.
Right.
he was saying that as Trump Incorporated, right?
Trump LLC.
He was saying that as a limited liability corporation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so to him, it's almost a joke to say that,
Right.
and he wasn't talking about his personal wealth.
Of course not. Yeah.
And I think
'Cause-
that's where we get lost because
Exactly.
we bundle it all up into the same,
Yeah. People get confused. I remember this reminds me of way back. I mentioned Trump's bankruptcy that she's talking about to a mentor of mine. He laughed at me. He said, "I don't think you understand how this stuff works." And it's exactly how you described. And he later described, how you can isolate the risk in the lived liability company and the debts associated with that. Doesn't touch your personal, blah blah blah. Equity stripping, which Trump does.
it's a great way to get rid of your debt. I mean, I hate to say that, but in a business, purely financial, commercial way, his use of bankruptcy is the moving of a pawn on a chessboard. I mean, it means hardly anything in the grand scheme of everything. It really, again, it's not him; it's the company, and all he's doing is chairing the company. It's not. It's a completely different thing.
That point, and me thinking, what are you talking about? He was sitting outside of Trump Tower, and I'm looking and I'm going, and I didn't understand, and I think I just thought about it maybe like a year or two ago, and I found it interesting. It makes me all the more proud of my parents. They got through that.
The heliport is right up here somewhere, and yeah, my parents use it all the time. My parents have a helicopter, which is really fun, and they take it to and from the city when they
Right, everybody has one, right?
And if I'm smart, I figure out when they're going, and I can get
take
either
it
a
to our
ride in or a
family
ride out.
museum.
But then I have to take a car like everyone else.
Oh,
my
she did
God.
it. She did it.
Oh, dude. Oh, look, I'm driving myself.
My dad's an amazing person, and he is famous, and I'm aware of that, and I recognize it. But I always feel like, oh, he's a golfer. No one's going to know who he is because he's a golfer, and that's like a different world. But then everyone's like, of course we know who he is. What are you talking about? And fortunately for him, he was good enough to turn pro and make it on his own.
Good enough to turn pro, make it on his own.
He made it on his own. Don't you
It's not
know
like he had the best coaches.
all sports figures and musicians make it on their own, and
I have
actors.
to have a college degree, but he sort of went from nothing and made it into everything, which is very admirable.
See, I swear that's their like family mythos. Like every single one of them is taught that we came from nothing. Okay,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
You got to tell people that. Please don't ever actually look and see why we're rich.
The oldest English settlement in the state of New York.
Oh, but look, what does it say?
Incorporated.
Yeah.
Which we were talking about the other day. Guys, we're talking about incorporating the township. Obviously, we need a lot of capital for that, so we're going to do a capital raise, but guys, we got to start doing this stuff ourselves.
I know, and really if you really boil this down, really, all you're really looking at is the most successful private association. This is a documentary about the most successful, you could say family, but really it's a private association of families.
Exactly.
That's really what this is.
Established 1640. It's interesting. I was looking into my bloodline, and they actually came here in the 1600s.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Indentured or slaves?
I don't think so.
You talking about, which side are you talking about?
My father's. So.
And he's what?
German and English. And, my grandma told me growing up, yes, we are related to the royals. Distant. It's not like I get anything from that, but.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, you have to be declaring it and bearing that family history to be benefiting from it. Why does he get this money when he turns 21, right? Which is how he started this document. Well, it's because he's acknowledged to be an heir. But if you're not, declaring heirship, or your parents aren't doing it for you, well, then there is no, you're not gonna, you might be do something, who knows? But the question becomes then, are you gonna accept it, and the aristocratic status that just comes with it now that you see this.
Well, it's just like the last John Wick film where he had to go back to his family and try to get the family crest again.
Exactly.
It's so
it's regal.
This is the Bathing Corporation, and this is where I come to bathe, eat lunch, and sit on the beach. And I've been there all afternoon, and now I'm going to give you guys a tour of Southampton. Now we're going onto Main Street of Southampton. I'm not a big shopper myself. I sort of go into Saks because my parents forgot that they still gave me my charge card. So that's the one store that I can buy clothes at where I don't have to pay for them, and it gets charged to them, which is amazing. This is the Meadow Club.
So to be clear, why are you not a big shopper? Oh, because you don't have credit, you don't have access to your money, right?
So you're not even shopping.
Essentially, she just basically told a little fib there. I would, in other words, I would be addicted to shopping if I could just, not have any, if I had credit, basically.
The tennis, all the tennis is played here. It's only a tennis club, but you can probably play like squash and that kind of thing, racket club, if you will. This is extremely, extremely like waspiest of wasps. But it's beautiful. As you can see, all the courts are grass. You have to wear all white to even be here.
Is he a member?
Well, he's probably a pro. I brought 3.
Did you catch that?
Yeah, the camera guy asked her, "Is he a member?"
Is that black guy a member? And she's like, she knows he's not, but he is a pro, so he's a hireling. Yeah, he's not. He can't be a member and be black.
We're 4 Jewish friends to the Bathing Corporation.
Whoa, wait. Did you just hear that?
Well, yeah, I told you, they're all. I mean, essentially, they're all the Jew. I mean, this is what Jewish is. This is the royal. What do you think the Queen of England is? I mean,
oh yeah, you just gotta look at the schnozzes, yeah.
Today for lunch, and it's fine. I mean, actually, I don't know. It was the first time I've ever brought anyone, so.
I feel like she's one. It's like those movies from the 80s, she's like the ugly friend. In this case, the profane.
Oh, that's my other daughter. She doesn't do much. She does enjoy the good bathing club every once in a while.
Who knows, I may get kicked out tomorrow, but I think it was fine. I think the people at the club would probably not be that excited if someone came in with a black person. Especially someone, not that I have any problem with it, please, but especially being that my parents, for example, are relatively new to the club or to all of this in general. So, we're already on sort of, watch, Like, everyone already sort of, is speculating on, what we might do wrong, I feel like.
I wonder if there's any Asians there.
She's new money.
Exactly. They keep an eye on her, period.
When you go out in Southampton, you definitely will go to Conscience Point. There are everybody from New Yorkers to, famous DJs to Puff Daddy, having...
Let's face it, to be a famous DJ, that's an incredible amount of privilege.
Well, like you said, I mean, you look at Justin Bieber, you look at all of these people are all part of the family, and they're not successful. I mean, even Jimi Hendrix is a direct descendant of that family. Just like Barack Obama, they're not first black this or the first black that. Halle Berry is not the first black. No, she's white. This is what people don't understand. White meaning blood.
And by the way, guys, if you guys haven't seen Clint on his YouTube channel, Red Pill Sunday School, he brought back his episode about the bloodlines. I highly encourage you watch that, and this film will start to make more sense as well.
Yeah.
This is like the part 2.
I will come in at about 7 o'clock and do the table seating for the night of what party, how important are they, where are they going to be seated in the club. Obviously, attractive women is going to help you because that looks good for us. You know, we want to see Cristal champagne sitting on the table because there are other people that are in the crowd that will want to ultimately emulate that.
Luke, how are you, man?
Hey, good to see you, dude.
Nice to see you.
But the nightlife in the Hamptons is about as despicable as it gets. You know, the fact that we all go out there, we all go out there to relax, enjoy ourselves, maybe play some tennis, sit out on the lawn, go to the beach. And then we find ourselves in these places which are even worse than the clubs in New York at night. You go out there, and there's Joey and Tommy and Billy and Maddie. And you met Joey and Tommy, and, they're all unzunsing and, they're all doing their thing, and, it's just so gross. I mean, I just don't understand why we can't just go out there and have people at one another's houses and sit back. We can get drunk. We can do lots of drugs. We can be decadent. We just don't need to do it with Joey and Tommy.
They all are.
But it's like the one time where they actually get to show off. They can only show off with each other, right? Because again, this is not. You don't do this in public. You fit into the public when you're, and this is all about fitting in. This is all about, what it is to be a wealthy heiress or heir.
Yeah.
At the same and not having it a known entity, but then at the same time, this is about, well, no matter what I do, I'm going to become successful or famous. And that's the bizarre thing is they want you to know, but at the same time they don't want you to know, right?
We have a 2-bottle minimum per table. Our cheapest bottle is $250 a bottle. And champagne prices go all the way up to a magnum of Cristal would be $900.
The standard night is to go out with maybe like 10 or 12 people. We get 2 tables, and each table gets 2 bottles. So each table would be about like $800, which is extremely expensive, You're sitting there like, why am I doing this? Why am I spending $800? That could be so many other things. Like, I could go to Europe. I could, go to the Bahamas. I could buy a pair of pants. I don't know.
I could do anything for me. Never is it I could help people, right?
It's not even like anything like starting a business even. It's just
The barbell's that big,
consumables, experiences.
I don't remember the evening all that
Just
clearly.
disgusting.
Yeah, it really is. It's like that old phrase, not that this film proves it to be true, but that old phrase, by the time you get to the 3rd generation, the wealth is squandered. And in this case, I think that you could rephrase that and just say by the 3rd generation, they don't even know what money is.
I've definitely spent, several $1,000s on a barbell, probably. Yeah. These things happen.
Everybody who started going out in 10th grade is still going out, and nobody from New York is new. Maybe somebody from Europe or somebody from LA or somebody from Chicago, but nobody from New York that I can think of is new. Like, you never would have heard of them. They all went to private school, and they all, you would have hung out with them at some point in time.
They all know each other, and it's and that is their dating pool. And I would say it's pretty much limited to that circle.
I mean, that just says a lot right there.
It's certainly, and again, it makes perfect sense. Like you said, you want to keep it in the family, and you want to keep the family the family. I mean, you've been doing it for centuries.
I've never actually dated outside my social background, and I've thought about that. Never. It's really weird. I never really thought about it. I think it's just like your compatibility, somebody on your same wavelength, like understanding.
I only date my family. I would never date outside the family. I mean, that would be just,
we couldn't be compatible. You might have a normal looking kid if I don't inbreed.
Right.
But he'd have to understand the fact that, I love going shopping somewhere and spending all this money on something, and I'm sure some guy might get mad at me for being stupid and spending all this money for like a Gucci purse, and he'd be like, "What are you doing?" But of course, I'm like,
I'll marry you, you cunt. As long as you don't get mad at me for using your money for charitable purposes.
have it,
I think it'd probably be weird to bring someone to your homes.
I mean, at least she's kind of fun seeming. This guy is, oh my god, he's such a, he's such a Debbie Downer.
To your summer house, or maybe to introduce them to your parents, or something like that, and or just or when you introduce them to your parents and their parents are asking them about where they live, and
He's got the same eyes as a school shooter. Being
he does, yeah. He's probably taking his family opiate. But what he's saying is true. The wealthiest people I've met, they were always really weird about me meeting their family.
They're so, they live in this world where they might be like, "So where do you summer?" or something like that. Or
it's such a unique situation we're in at the end of the day. I mean, really, there are so few people with whom we could actually share this kind of stuff in common that it ends up being a subject of conversation quite a bit because you can't really relate to any of it. And it's not to say that we need to pour our hearts out about it, I mean, pouring your heart out about it feels good. Talk about it makes you feel good. How
This guy's fucked up on something.
But he's making the point, and the question then becomes, if you're in this situation, are you going to be the same way? It's how you're brought up. It's how all your friends, all your peers. I mean, what does it take? I mean, he's saying that talking about it is not It's not that they're airing laundry and it makes them feel good to repent. It's saying, how do you talk about wealth and make yourself feel bad about being wealthy? You can't. Right? I mean, it's what he's saying.
Everything about it feels good.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not to say that we need a shoulder to cry on. Not at all. The point is, it ends up being something we talk about a lot because we're so alone in the circumstance.
Because it's all you have.
growing up and going to Chapin and seeing my friends that got divorced, the parents definitely, they just forgot about the kids and just fought over the money themselves, and how is the wife going to take care of herself if she gets so low of an amount, and how is she going to take care of the kids, and she wants the plane, and he's going to take the plane, and who gets the house in the country, and in terms of marriage, anybody's going to have a prenuptial agreement these days. And I know that sounds really bad, but you just have to.
I was going to school one day, and I saw in one of the news boxes a huge picture of
Which, by the way, guys, talking to the men out here, you don't have a prenup. That's the very least thing you should. You should, at the very least, have a prenup. But even better than a prenup is an irrevocable trust in setting things up the right way.
both my parents, and there was a rip down the center of the picture. And this was before I had officially been told that they were getting divorced. And I came out of school that day, and there was a swarm of photographers and paparazzi and all these things waiting to ask me questions. And I mean, I wanted to stay in school because I wanted to have a normal day and do all this, but it makes it that much more difficult to deal with your own personal emotions and to think about, your family and your brothers and what they're going through, knowing that you're going to walk out of the building and there's going to be a bunch of people running after you asking you difficult questions.
I have no intention of being loyal.
The truth of the matter is that the paparazzi are what make these people feel anything like special. Like they're famous for nothing. They're famous for being famous, right? Paris Hilton, that they don't have. I mean, they probably in reality the paparazzi is probably their favorite thing in the world because it makes them feel like they're royalty. And it's just they don't hate it. I'll tell you that. And you know, you're basically the spokesmodel and advocate for your family and its wealth.
Loyal to any woman anytime soon, or not that I probably ever will be, but one day I'll fall in love and I'll get married, whatever. I'll probably get divorced a couple of years later. I'll have a serious prenup before.
Prenup. It's been drilled into my head since I was 5 years old. Prenup. All the way. And if this little ungrateful bitch has the nerve to say something like it's unromantic, I don't want a prenup, then she's just a gold digger and I don't want to get married to her anyways.
Well, that's the problem with prenups. It's pretty hard to convince the other party to sign that. It's not exactly sexy.
And I think when these people say prenup, they don't mean a simple prenup. You know?
Oh no,
You're not going to a 2-bit lawyer. They
Oh,
you know,
no.
their prenup would be it probably does include trusts and everything else.
Oh, it absolutely has to. And I'll be later walking through how we can use what they're doing with that.
All that really means is pre the oath or pre the promise. So you're really just saying protect yourself before. It doesn't say what it is.
Yeah. It's all about making sure your pre-marriage assets stay pre-marriage assets.
I guess it's a little strange to be thinking.
Well, a lot of these families too, and even lower wealthy families, part of their contingencies for their kids to inherit, uh, stuff from the family trust is, well, you got to have the prenup in your marriage. If you
Well, yeah,
don't,
but you also got to think, what does this girl just say? She says, "I never date outside my social class." Well, that
Yeah.
means that she's going to want to. Her family's going to want her to have a prenup as well. They're
Yeah,
gonna
exactly.
when they marry, it's like kind of like a king's daughter or a king's son marrying
It
another
is.
king's daughter to it's for peace, it's for commerce, it's to
Yeah.
establish a
It's
sense of
business.
a state, right? But they're not. I'm sure both kings are like, okay, you get married, but you're neither of us are taking either part of
Yeah.
each other's estate. I'm sure this is a known entity in this world. What they're talking about is a shiksa or taking a goyim girl and being stupid enough to marry for love instead of estate. Well, yeah, then yeah. But I mean, how many of them do that, really?
Oh, absolutely none of them. I mean, just like you were saying, it is business for them, and
Yeah,
it's a
well, and if you're a smart little goyim, you're not going to press the issue, and you're going to put up with a lot of shit, be beaten, and all that by your, they become your master. So
yeah.
if you're getting married into this type of class, you're going to learn real quick that you're going to have to keep your status. Make sure you know that you're not
Thinking
part
about
of the
divorce
family.
before you even know if you're going to get
In
married.
any real sense.
But I've seen what can happen if you don't think like that. When my grandfather was 73, he left my grandmother and married the upstairs maid. If they'd lived happily ever after, things would have been great, but it didn't work out that way. At the end of his life, sick with cancer, he was medicated and manipulated into changing his will again and again. After he died, the court battle over the fortune he wanted to leave to charity destroyed his reputation, tore apart my entire family, and made his third wife one of the richest women in the world. My dad never really got over the whole thing. For a guy who thought it was impolite to talk about money in the first place, having the whole mess discussed in the New York Times every day was a total nightmare. I was too young to read the papers, but I could sense the tension at home, and I knew
He just said that whole event he was describing ripped up the family wealth, but here they are still the family wealth.
Yeah, I didn't quite get that either.
I don't think he understands. Yeah.
Well, and the wealth that she was able to take was a very small part of a much grander fortune that he's tucked away in trusts and other private assets.
I feel like he used the will as the distraction. When she didn't know about the other estate planning
I
functions he
definitely
had.
didn't want to inherit was that fear of talking about money.
I know you don't like talking about money. When I was little, you always told me it was a bad idea to talk about it, and I shouldn't. And if anything, I should lie if people ask me. And I just want to know, what are you so scared of?
Well, perhaps I was mistaken. I mean,
what the fuck? What are you talking about? You were mistaken. That's bullshit. You were mistaken for 20 years of my life?
no, money is a thing that you don't talk about because it's in bad taste. Why bring it up? It's really not important.
If you never examine it, you'll never really understand it. You won't be able to solve any of the issues or resolve any of the
Well,
problems.
I'm not so sure this thing's a good idea.
I think rich people are actually pretty confused these days. They don't know how they're supposed to feel about themselves because they've been getting so many different images, that you see wealth is this cool thing. People strutting around in expensive clothing means something. But at the same time, you see a lot of shows that are on TV, they're trying to make it seem like the everyday middle-class family is where the real life is, where happiness exists.
I think that a lot of kids that grow up with money or some sort of affluent lifestyle, that lifestyle can sort of it really holds them back from discovering their passions and what really makes them feel good about life.
I remember once I was on a job in Australia, and this guy just walks up to me. I was at some, like after celebrating party. It was a fashion show there. And this man walks up to me who I'd never met and says, what does it feel like to be wealthy? And I was like, excuse me? And he goes, what does it feel like to never have felt any pain? And that really upset me, not because I was upset for myself, but because I was upset for him. Like, I was bothered by the fact that he could be so ignorant, and like that there are people out there who could like say such a blanketed thing and just be so downright stupid and just, not use the brain that they had. And that's what bothered me, not the fact that he could make not the fact that anything he said really, wounded me deep down, just the fact.
I kind of feel like it did.
In all of these, yeah, I know what you mean.
People out there who think
These Freudian slips they're making.
The thing that with money comes happiness.
He knows that what this guy meant was not that kind of pain, right?
Exactly.
Not heartbreaking. Oh, he's talking about poverty. He's
Financial
talking
hardship,
about,
yeah.
when have you ever been hungry, you stupid...
Maybe she was hungry for an hour.
Yeah, well, after she stuck her finger down her throat.
Do you ever worry about getting cut out of your family's
Yes.
will or your company?
I'm extremely paranoid. I'm paranoid all the time that suddenly, like the next fax from my grandfather or the next phone call is gonna be, I'm really disappointed in you because you wore the wrong pair of shoes the other day. So, you're on your own. Have fun. Sure, big time. Scares the hell out of me.
It's regrettable. There are an enormous number of things I really, really count on, the absence of which would bring about a lot of emotional distress, maybe even intellectual distress.
What do you think? What would you do if you lost all your money tomorrow morning?
I don't know. It's kind of like, well, I'm not going to compare it to that, but it is in the same way like the idea of losing a parent or a sibling. This is something you don't really like to think about. Maybe some people do. Maybe some people can handle the prospect psychologically of either of these two losses occurring, and they can actually foresee themselves. I don't think I could really think about it till it actually happened.
See, that's kind of what I mean, man. It's like wealth is like a parent, losing a parent. You take it for granted so much that it's like a part. It's not even a consideration, and that's
Right.
the
That's what he's
that's
saying.
the weird part. I mean, it is like part of your family. I mean, that's really bizarre. I mean, no, how
Yeah.
many people can say something like that and actually be have a straight face?
You face a lot of different pressures from having money. When you win, it's if a professional was to go out and win, it's because you worked hard and you rode it well. As an amateur, some people will see that you rode well or you worked hard for that, but there will always be the people that said that you won because you had the nice horse. I could use it as an excuse to not come and not work, but I've kind of swapped that and made it be an encouragement and incentive to come and work even harder. Kind of prove people wrong.
I think it can actually give you more drive, but a lot of times that's turned away
What
from
is
family.
that?
Like showing up your family, like saying, I told you so, look what I can do. That's why you see sometimes, wealthy kids turn to drugs or you hang out with really whack job people because they want to shock their family. They want to show that they can escape from the mold that their family all seems to be a part of. I mean, personally, the way I'm going about that is because I plan to actually graduate college and go to graduate school and fucking thumb my nose up at them with a PhD in something. That's it. I mean, that's my little form of revenge.
Rather than getting Barbie dolls, I used to get upset.
What
I
a
always
rebel.
wanted Legos or like erector sets or something like this. So I love like looking at the New York skyline and being able to figure out like what I'm going to add to that. And
This is my skyline.
It's like a monkey pointing to the jungle.
I've basically always wanted to go to real estate development. It's in the blood, I guess.
Oh.
One of my buildings.
I want to be indispensable. That's my primary objective. I mean, whatever I do, I want to be as indispensable as I can. Now, that's a little vague. Probably like a lawyer or in business, is my guess.
From the beginning, Luke had doubts about being involved in this movie. In fact, most of the kids I interviewed were pretty nervous after talking on camera. In some ways, you really want to talk about it. But even still, you're never quite sure how the rest of the world is going to judge you for what you say. When the gossip columns finally found out I was making this movie, that put an end to the interviewing. Some of the kids really started to panic. Luke took it the farthest. He hired a lawyer and sued me for defaming his character. Maybe I should have seen this coming. It's not like I wasn't warned.
The defendant, Jamie Johnson, sheepishly, surreptitiously, and in the vein of irrelevancy, whatever the hell that means, flashed a document in front of the plaintiff, Luke Wheel, indicating that the plaintiff, Luke Wheel's signature on said document was a prerequisite to the plaintiff's effectuation of the interview to be used in this project, and that said executed document was an irrelevant formality that needed to be.
I mean, you want to talk about Jewish lawyers.
What I guess they are saying, but I got to tell you that I consider it irrelevant, is they're trying to make it seem as if Wheel didn't really know what he was signing when he signed something. All of this stuff about sheepishly and surreptitiously, they're trying to make it seem like, oh, Luke, by the way, I mean, you have to sign this thing, but it's nothing. And the irony here is that Luke, who clearly can afford to try to deal with his problems this way, is suing you. And he can afford to sue you. And very likely he will play this thing out for all it's worth. It's worth much, but it's sort of the irony of making a film about wealthy people that their very wealth allows them to come back and sue you if they become unhappy with what it is that you've done.
The judge threw Luke's lawsuit out of court, and my lawyer says everything's okay. The whole thing was pretty depressing while it lasted, but everyone's telling me that getting sued for the first time is a serious rite of passage for a rich kid.
What is this, The Great Gatsby?
I know, he looks like a silent movie actor or something.
I was always told that the American dream is about getting a bigger and better life than your parents had. But that dream was accomplished by my great-grandfather. So I live outside the American dream. And now it's my job to build a meaningful life apart from all this privilege I've inherited. I've learned that part of coming of age is finding something that's your own and not your family's legacy. I've had the benefit of being rich all my life, and I'll never want for material things. But after working on this movie, I've discovered that what you inherit may not be as valuable as what you earn. And although I still haven't found all the answers, at least now I know how important it is to ask the questions.
TikToks.
This was a lot of fun, Glenn. I am excited for the next one.
It was kind of fun. I mean, it's
and
it's also very eye-opening at the same
Yeah.
time. You know, it really is hard. I think it is truly hard to put yourself in the position and how you would act in that same position. There's a bit of empathy going on for me because, I mean, I just imagine all the things I could do.
Right.
If offered the choice, you know, basically to say whatever you do, you're going to be successful or famous or this or that. I mean, that makes the choice a little more difficult. And I think it's why you never heard, well, I'm going to be Mother Teresa. You know, I'm going to be the next saint. I'm going to do something good for. I think it's why you don't, because you're choosing things that are going to further benefit your choice, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're choosing fame for the benefit of fame.
I have put myself in their shoes. I at least try to, and I get it, man. I really do.
That's the thing. Like I said, if anybody was in these circumstances, I mean, hell, it's remained as sort of an open secret for how long now? How many generations? So obviously, I mean, maybe Jamie here, Mr. Johnson, is the exception. I don't know. It'd be an interesting interview. I'll tell you that. If you get him to do an interview, but I'm sure that he learned his lesson.
Yeah, I'm sure he's enclave now beyond interviews.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like the guy. It'd actually be interesting to meet him and actually talk to him. He actually seems to realize something's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, there's a sense of endearment with that guy.
Unless, there's also the possibility that this was a psyop and, they're releasing this just to appease people. And, because a lot of times I find in our peer group, in the truth movement, it's kind of like the same thing, where all you care about is whether you're right or not. How about economists? It's like, I'm going to make a prediction, and all I care about if I was right. I'm predicting the end of the world. It doesn't matter if the world's ending. It only matters that I'm right about the end of the world. It's like that kind of thing. So a lot of people can say, see, I told you so, and then sort of be done with it and not pursue it anymore or care about it anymore. But again, these are the people controlling your life, your style choices, your food, everything is controlled by this bloodline. And I just can't stress that enough, that things will never change as long as there's this type of inequity, no justice whatsoever, no true equality, nothing. I mean, it's just everything's a delusion.
That's why, I'm inspired to start that township. Get out of the cities. Let's form these incorporated townships. Don't be scared of incorporated, guys.
I also liked the idea of your own credit union. And we looked into that, and that was a pretty interesting idea. So
yeah.
I mean, if you got everything in one and you have no outside dependence, I think that's the key.
So yeah, guys, it's time we become our own Rockefellers, all right? And not be like what we just saw, right? And that's also one of my goals, is to have the trust company, so that we don't have kids turn into that. Managing family's wealth for generations. So yeah, guys, we'll be talking about that more, what that can look like. And yeah, guys, this was fun. All right, guys, I will see you guys on the next video.
Take care.